And
I'm Emily Erdley.
And I'm going to be asking her a few questions on philosophy and her psychology major. So, suppose a psychological theory that in general there are no such things as minds, that people simply behave. How would you argue this as a psychology major?
I would say that if we were simply behaving, we would be a little bit closer to animals, because there's pretty much always reasoning behind every decision that we make, and it has to come from somewhere. And that comes from the mind, and that's how we articulate our thoughts, and I don't think that we just blindly behave. That's more instinctual, I think.
Okay. As psychologists study both animals and humans, would you believe that animals behave according to their mind or instincts?
I think instinct. I think they pretty much learn from their parents, the animals in their family. They learn based on mimicry, whether it be mimicking humans or mimicking their other little friends. I think it's definitely more instinct, and yes, I think sometimes they use their mind, but it's mostly instinct on what they think they need to do to survive.
Okay. A case study on Phineas Gage, who studied frontal brain damage affecting personality. Do you believe that life is ultimately unfair, that there are no such things as good or wicked individuals?
I do think that life is ultimately unfair, but I still think that there is such thing as wicked or good individuals. But I also think that that is subject to change. I don't think that's a fixed sort of thing. I think that people can change who they are, or how they act if they have that kind of spark, that urge to change, if they think that they don't really like the way that their life is going.
Okay. Should the ethics code that therapists should avoid multiple relationships in which they play both professional and another role in the life of the same patient? Therefore, is freedom always a good thing?
I think that freedom isn't always a good thing, no, because you have your instances where you leave a kid at home and they just eat all the candy because they can. And I think the same thing can also go for some therapists. Not saying that they're malicious in nature at all, but I definitely think that it's a slippery slope, especially with some people who are mentally ill can overthink and overanalyze certain things and think that someone being nice is flirting. Because especially with someone with a trauma response, they may not be used to that kind of affection or that kind of love. And a therapist is meant to love their clients as people, but not in any sort of interpersonal relationship. It's supposed to remain professional, just like you would with your doctor or your dentist. Just because y'all talk about more personal things doesn't mean that y'all need to be more personal outside the office. If you run into each other, definitely say hey, be like, at the grocery store, oh my gosh, but don't invite them to your home.
Yeah. In the murder of Kitty Genovese, psychologists studied the terrible real-life bystander effect. Suppose God was looking down watching the case. What would he say about the activity? What would it amount to in his eyes?
I think that he would be disappointed in the people that kind of just stood there, but I don't think that he would be necessarily mad at them. I think he would understand that a lot of people kind of have that group mentality where they choose not to do something because nobody else is doing it, and they don't want to seem weird, or they don't want to be the first one to do it, or they're scared about what could happen. And I definitely think that's what happened, but I still think at the end of the day, we are accountable for what we do and who we help. And I think at the end of the day, he wants us all to be just like the Good Samaritan and help people when we can, where we can, regardless of what it may do to us. Because our job is to help people and to reach out to people as Christians or as Catholics. It's to study his word and live life through him. And the best way to do that is through kindness and love, in my opinion.
Okay. Regarding the same case, what is the meaning of life? Is it the happiness of doing well in life, success, influence, and love that overshadows the meaning of others' lives?
I definitely think happiness is equal to success. I definitely think that in order to be content with what you have, you kind of have to have gone through some stuff to realize that what you have is good. And it really just learning to appreciate what you have can make you all the happier. Nothing necessarily has to change, just your perspective does.
Okay. Chris Castor Sizemore, diagnosed with multiple personality disorder known as dissociative identity disorder, sees different aspects of her past belonging to her different personalities. In this case, could anyone be certain if she believes herself in God? Can one personality and one not believe in him?
I believe that every body has one soul, or every one body has one soul. One can have multiple personalities. That is a brain thing. But I think that as long as one of the personality believes, that's enough for the soul of the person. That's kind of how I think. I haven't done a lot of research on it, so that's just like kind of just pondering it right now in my head, my thought.
Of course. Seen from these cases of people in utmost pain, if there is evil in the world, does God not know about it, or can he do nothing about it, in your opinion?
I think that he knows about it and he can do something about it, but sometimes he chooses not to in order to either teach a lesson or to make someone stronger, or sometimes the devil will try to prove a point that God's people are not as strong as God thinks that they are. And so sometimes God will allow the devil to test them to prove that we are strong and to prove to ourselves that we are strong.
As counselors decrease client dependency and encourage independent decision-making while not imposing their own goals in a judgment-free zone, like our friends, how real of a job does this account for? What is the purpose?
So, in my opinion, friends can be there for you, but they can't always be there for you. I've had a couple of friends where it was kind of toxic, where I was treated as a therapist, but they were not emotionally uplifting for me at all. And so for them to constantly be negative and me always lifting them up and them never lifting me up in the same regard, that was really damaging for me. And it can go one-sided very quickly, whereas therapy is meant to be one-sided and you pay for it to be one-sided. And so that person is trained specifically to listen to you and not take that home with them.
Mm-hmm.
Not to soak up your problems like a sponge. That's what we're trained to do.
Of course. Are disorders of the mind, such as anxiety, bipolar, and depression, real illnesses or pigmentation of the mind, as their brains aren't disrupted like other serious mental disorders?
I think they are definitely real. It all has to do with the serotonin imbalance. Some brains don't produce enough, whereas my body personally sends too much serotonin to the wrong place. So your stomach and your brain are both serotonin producers. And so sometimes it can get confused and send too much serotonin to the stomach. And that's what causes stomach problems with anxiety.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Some of the time. Not all the time, but some of the time.
That's crazy. Some of the information given in school is inevitably not true, as psychologists provide personal hypotheses. How do we know the truth is simply determined by investigation?
I think that as researchers in general, we're all constantly trying to find the truth and build upon the truth. I think that in all aspects of all the fields, not only psychology, I think we're constantly backtracking and correcting history. Just like Christopher Columbus, everybody thought that he discovered America, and now we're slowly starting to learn more about it as we delve deeper into it. So there's no shame in backtracking to make sure it's true or to debunk it.
Of course. Is the scientific answer to a question always the truest? Can psychologists' hypotheses fully answer the unknown, or do they go off pre-existing hypotheses and build off sometimes accurate data from there?
I definitely think that science has a big part in what we should believe. Scientific evidence is very much a reliable source, but I don't think that it's the only reliable source. I think that, especially with philosophers, y'all don't really think about scientific stuff as much as theoretical hypotheticals. And so I definitely think that science isn't all you need to follow.
Okay. If belief makes a person, does every individual's statement have credibility? Specifically, would rational or scientific thinking give them more credibility?
I think a little bit of both, but it depends on who you're talking to. I think that scientific credibility is often taken as the most truthful thing nowadays, but if you're talking to a friend and they know that you're a rational person and you're most likely going to be right when you're talking about it, then that's still credible, but I don't think as credible. I think scientific is still the best.
Yeah, I agree. Is the bystander effect a real thing, or is it affected by what you know of yourself?
I think it is a real thing. I think that it kind of goes hand in hand with that like mob mentality kind of thing where a lot of people, especially nowadays, are followers, even if they don't think that they are. A lot of people will not do something just because no one else is doing it. And so most people will wait for something to be trendy in order to do it. Like I hear a lot of like sentences that start, "Why can't we bring back blank?" and they'll name a fashion trend. I'm like, you can bring it back yourself. Like, I don't think you need to wait for other people to do it. But people are just scared to be that trendsetter.
Yeah, I agree. What does it mean when individuals with brain illnesses such as multiple personality disorder are told to just be yourself?
I think that it's definitely can be kind of confusing because they're like, what self do I mean? But I think that they really just mean like, don't put up any barriers and like, don't try to change who you are or the way that you behave for anyone but yourself, unless it's hurting other people.
Of course.
So, like in therapy, they always talk about, how everything's confidential unless you're a danger to yourself or others. It's kind of like the same thing. Like if it's gonna hurt other people, then like don't say it. Like definitely like try to not do that. But I think that when they say be yourself, they just mean don't hold yourself back from doing what you love or what you want within reason.
Okay. How can you be sure if a patient is being genuine with you about how they feel if gestures are intended to fool you, like a smile or a laugh can shadow their real feelings?
I definitely think that nowadays a lot of people are used to kind of having to fake it till you make it. But that has definitely gone down, and I've noticed in the past at least like 3 or 4 years, I've noticed a little bit less fakeness on the internet. Like there's still a lot, but I see a little bit more transparency in people talking about their feelings when it comes to mental illness.
Okay.
That's all I can speak for on mental illness. I don't know about any of the other ones.
Of course, yeah. If therapists are present for pushing their patients towards a more independent path, how are the patients making a decision that was entirely on their own if the patient's judgment was persuaded initially by their therapist? Does this really make them more independent or a follower?
I think that it does make them more independent because the therapist, in this way that they're doing it, they are teaching them how to kind of stand on their own. Kind of like teaching a child how to walk. It's like, hey, I'm going to give you this sort of nugget of advice because you may need it, because you may not be prepared to be independent. But I'm going to slowly step away farther and farther as I give you these advices, as I give you these coping mechanisms and these skills. I'm going to slowly back up as you are okay with it so that you can be more independent and you don't have to lean on your therapist as much. Still see them as much as you feel that you need to. There's no shame in that. But I think that a therapist's job is to ready them for the world on their own and assist them in that. And I think that not only mentally ill people need therapists. I think everybody should have someone to professionally talk to that keeps all their secrets for them.
Of course, that's a good answer. Some say to be a good person, one must be true to oneself. So are therapists curing individuals of their birthright disorders ethical if they are encrypting another working mind in place of the original individual?
I think that trying to change people who don't want to change is very difficult. So I think that a lot of people have impressionable minds, and I don't know, I just feel like some therapists try to manipulate their clients into what they think is right, whereas a therapist should be willing to allow their client to make mistakes as long as they tell their client that, like, this is against my advice, but I'm here for you no matter what you do. And it's about that sort of teamwork.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
That actually did.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Do you believe in euthanasia if patients request it? And do you believe smaller illnesses such as bipolar, depression, etc. will be allowed to accept the same fate in the nearby future?
No, I don't. I think that what euthanasia started out as was good intentions, I think they just wanted to help people who weren't comfortable. But we have a lot of technology now, especially with my dad working in hospice. I know a little bit more about it. We have a lot more technology to make these people more comfortable, and we have a lot better facilities now that feel like home, that don't feel so medical. Like, I visited my dad's facility, and it just looks like a little house. And people are comfortable there, and it doesn't look so medical. And I think that these kinds of things can make people feel so much more comfortable and actually give them like a reason to live, rather than the euthanasia, where I do think it's kind of like giving up. But I also think that in that sense the doctors could be playing God, because in my opinion God is the only one who should decide who lives and dies and when. And I feel that that shouldn't be up to a judge or a doctor or a person themselves, really.
I agree. What aspects of euthanasia do you believe are just and unjust?
I think that in animals, I think that it is just because we do have more dominion over them, but not just because they're like property, because I feel that there is definitely a big emotional connect between human and animal, but euthanasia can help give peace to the animal because their bodies are not meant to live as long, and they're not meant to be as durable. And I think that's where euthanasia can be, I wouldn't say good, but accepted or acceptable, because I do understand that a lot of people and a lot of animals are just too far gone, but I definitely think that humans are like where we draw the line of, if you're gonna kill yourself, like, you have to do it yourself. I think that it should be like that. I don't think you should be able to sign up to be killed because you're in pain.
Yeah, I agree. Women make up 76% of new psychology doctorates. Do you think men and women think differently, even if they share the same mental illnesses? If so, what would the top tier difference be?
I would say that men and women do think very differently, but I do think that that is why a lot of men and women work so well together. Because men do tend to be a little bit more logical in their thinking, more rational thinkers, whereas women are more emotionally driven. But I find that these are both strengths, not weaknesses, when they are used in balance. Of course, I think every woman, not every woman, I would say that some women like me have a hard time not being so empathetic. And some men have a harder time being empathetic, and some men have a lot more empathy. So I think that it is a bit of a generalization when I do say that they have different thinking, because you do have your more like logical women and your more emotional men as well. But I think on average, I would say that men are more like logical and like stoic, I would say, and women are more like nurturing and emotional.
Do you think psychologists of different races think and pursue their work differently?
I think yes, but only because of their different backgrounds, because your upbringing has a lot to do with who you are, and that goes for everybody. I think that my life could be very different from another white person who grew up with less money or more money, or a Mexican person who grew up with less money or more money. I think it really, yes, it could have to do with race because of different like regions and stuff where they live, but I think it really depends on your upbringing, how you act. But I do agree that like some like races have on average certain different types of like cultures that are not as known in other cultures. So I do think that they do act or treat people differently in their fields, but I don't think it gives them I don't think any of them have any more of an advantage or disadvantage to the others in the way that they work.
Okay. Psychologists deem that basis of qualities of health, genes, and character is beauty only skin deep, or does an attractive face reflect underlying good qualities?
I definitely think that I agree with a little bit of both. I think that we often look at people and judge them too quickly. But I definitely think that your inner beauty shines through the outside. Like, I know some people know, like, RBF, or, like, resting angry face. And some people are perceived as way ruder than they are, but they are actually really kind. Like my dad, when his face is resting, he looks really mean, but he's actually, like, really, really nice. And so I don't think that the outside only reflects what's inside, but I think that sometimes what's inside can shine through. Like, a lot of people who tend to be more enthusiastic and more happy tend to have a little bit more, like, lines on their face because they smile more often. And so some people think wrinkles are ugly, so does that make ugly people happier? I don't know. Probably not. But it's definitely something to ponder. But I think that if you are kind and if you are loving, then you are beautiful on the inside. And that usually will shine through, whether it be in looks or just the energy that you give off, I would say.
Okay. Does the appreciation of beauty make us more moral human beings, or is beauty a hoax, such as the halo effect, being so beautiful that you are assumed to also be smart, ambitious, and interesting?
I definitely think that does exist. I think that it makes us a little bit superficial. But I also think that we were given our eyes to judge and to determine what is right and wrong. But I think a lot of people use their eyes to judge people based on their looks and what they think they will act like, when it really has nothing to do with it. Like, you are your soul, you are your mind, you are your conscious, you're just living in a flesh body. Like, you're judging people based on, like, the meat suit that they live in. So I feel like that makes humans a little bit more rude, especially now with all these beauty standards being spread and Photoshop being so hard to recognize now. I think that it's really unhealthy how high of a standard we hold beauty to.
Okay. Well, thank you, Emily.
Of course.
And we're out.